Hello, Bristol. Welcome to another session of the Best of Bristol. Today, we're meeting with John Miller, Chair of the Bristol Planning Board. Hi, John.
How are you, Bruce?
All right. So, John, Planning Board, that sounds like a rather mystical agency. Well, let's start with the basics. Who are you and what got you involved in town government?
Let's see. Hi guys. I'm John Miller. I'm the chair of the Planning Board. Basically moved to Bristol in 2020. You know, at the end of the day, when we came to town, I've always felt like Bristol has just been an amazing community with a lot of great resources, and also I think some great vision around where Bristol was trying to go. When I came to town, got to know a lot of folks here at the town offices. When you look at some of the projects around the technology and the fiber optics of things that are going on in town, when you look at the history of the industry that's been in town, when you look at the work that's happened in the downtown area, there's just been an enormous amount of things, at least from my perspective, that have been great for the community, and you know, all of that comes back to a level of planning. So, you know, if I go back to your question, Bruce, and you said, how did you get involved? I wanted to just kind of understand where we were going and participate in that. So I joined the planning board a couple of years ago now. I was an alternate for a while, and then we've had some changes over the past year for the board. And in those changes, I ended up as the chair.
So, in your other life outside of volunteering for the town, because as I understand it, Planning Board is a volunteer organization.
It is.
All right. Did you have any background in planning boards or development or anything that kind of gave you a leg up on understanding how the process works?
I don't know about a leg up. I mean, we've been in New Hampshire for quite a while, and back in about 2005, I think, I was also an alternate on the planning board for Atkinson when we lived in Atkinson, New Hampshire. So I was on the planning board in Atkinson as an alternate for a couple of years while we were in town there. That's really started my exposure to some of the planning processes there. You know, I started out life as a contractor, so a little bit of understanding from a construction perspective. You know, but for me, I think, and we're so fortunate to have the volunteers that we do from a planning board perspective. You know, I think when you think about the planning board pieces are really about having an open mind, listening to other perspectives, listening to people that have cases or business that needs to come before the planning board, and then being able to have a conversation, understanding your perspective, listening to other perspectives, and have a good back and forth, and then being able to act on whatever those requests are or whatever the priorities are of the board. You know, so I wouldn't say that my experience is what's required to participate in the planning board, but you know, there were a couple things that definitely gave me a little bit of insight.
Now, let's talk planning board. It sounds a little bit like, you know, some mystical thing. Who or what created the planning board? Where does the planning board originate or come from in the scheme of government?
Okay, so you know, the planning board is if you go look up the New Hampshire RSAs, it's I think 674. Anyways, if you go onto the internet and you Google New Hampshire Planning Board regs, you'll see all kinds of pieces around the planning board, around the master plan, and sort of how the planning boards have come into existence from the state of New Hampshire.
So, you know, do all towns have a planning board, or is this unique to Bristol?
It's definitely not unique to Bristol. All towns are required to have a planning board. They're also required to have a master plan, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit more in a little bit. But in the same way, the way to kind of look at it, I think, is when you look at the select board they got to run the town. I mean, honestly, the job that they do is amazing, and definitely very significant for their time investment. The planning board has to take a bit of a longer view. I think it's important for us as a planning board, we need to interact with the other departments and the other volunteer organizations of the town to sort of understand where things are going, and then be able to represent that in the master plan, and then in how we have our priorities laid out from a planning board perspective.
Okay. Now, the actual role of the planning board, it deals with basically land use. Mm-hmm. And what you can and can't build, where you can build and where you can't, and that connects to zoning.
Yeah.
I've often heard of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, but the difference between the zoning board and the planning board sometimes gets confusing. Mm-hmm. What's the role of zoning board, zoning as a separate category, and planning board?
Well, so this is where me as a layperson probably won't get it exactly right. But the way I look at it in the differences, the planning board needs to help develop the zoning of the town. Like what are the rules? What are the things that we need to try to have the town reflect in land use? Where we're trying to go as a community. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples of that in a second. And then the Zoning Board of Adjustment, their job is they have the zoning rules. They have a whole host of things around how they have to go through that with an applicant that's looking for an exception to those zoning rules. And their job is to kind of sift through that, and then act on whatever that request is from that perspective.
So the planning board deals with a basic application for someone to use land for a particular purpose under the zoning established by the town. But if there's something that doesn't nicely fit into the checklists that the planning board uses, the applicant, the person wanting to build, has to go to the zoning board to say, could we make an exception because there's something unique, different, or special to get the project done?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description. I think the way to look at it is the planning board is about sort of like the longer term view. And we, again, I know I've used that a couple of times, but somebody looking to do something on an individual parcel, a regular building lot, wouldn't really be coming before the planning board per se, right? Like there are some instances where they need to, but generically, if they're looking to do something with their house and they want a front porch or something that's gonna, if it fits, if it's conforming use, conforming being inside of it, fitting within all the zoning pieces, then they'll deal with the land use office directly. Now the planning board has helped establish what those rules are, okay? And then basically the planning board just makes recommendations to the town, and then the town votes on them at town meeting, right? So we just did that a few weeks ago where we had to make some edits to some of our zoning rules, and the town had approved all of those. And then the zoning board enforces them.
Okay. Now, you just mentioned the land use department. What is that entity, and what does it do, and how does it interact with the planning board?
Well, so I'll give it to you from the planning board's perspective, but honestly, that's probably a way where maybe we have an interview with Joanne. She can really kind of go into the details from the land use office. But I think from the planning board's perspective, they're the group that we work with all the time. That's the group that helps administer our land use permits. Just sort of how all of our pieces are coming together from a town perspective.
So that's the professional staff that supports the planning board.
Yes.
And that's when you come to the town offices and you interact with the people at the counter. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go back to planning board structure? Are the members of the planning board appointed or elected?
No, they're appointed. So, and as a matter of fact, right now we have an opening for one member and an opening for an alternate. So we actually have 2 openings on the board right now.
Now, what's the difference between regular member and alternate member?
So the basic difference between an alternate and a regular member is we have 5 board members and 1 alternate is what we like to have. The role of the alternate is to be able to sit in if a regular member is not available or needs to abstain from a particular vote. Okay, so alternates are incredibly important to the process because, right now we have a 5-member board, which means we need 3 in a meeting to have a quorum. So if someone comes before us, 3 can, get the job done from that perspective. But if, let's just say something was before the board and one of the members, it was their neighbor, and they're, from their perspective, they want to abstain from that vote. So they would, recuse themselves, and then we would seat the alternate in order to kind of maintain a full board if we could.
Okay. Now, how often does the planning board meet?
Planning board meets twice a month, 2nd and 4th Wednesday, 7 p.m. here at the town offices.
And are these meetings open to the public?
They're always open to the public, as well as you can join via Zoom to listen in and interact with us. We're always looking for the community to participate.
Now, in addition to attending meetings, what else do members of the planning board do?
So there are definitely some other subcommittees that we have, including CIP, so the Capital Improvements Committee, Capital Improvements Plan. So, especially if you start looking at the RSAs from a planning board perspective, like the town needs to have a capital plan in order to be able to spend capital. So that's another aspect of the planning board that's incredibly important to the community. So when we're trying to do capital projects, that needs to be part of the capital planning process.
If someone watching our discussion today wants to learn more about the planning board, where should they go or who should they contact?
So there's a couple of recommendations there. One of them is stop by the land use office and talk with those folks. Definitely come to a meeting. I mean, like I said, Wednesday nights, 7 p.m., 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. We're here at the town offices, so definitely kind of come in. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it because, probably one of the most important things for me is I think everybody has an opinion. And I think part of what gets in folks' way at times around volunteering for something like the planning board is they're worried about being at odds with their neighbor. And, there's so many different ways I think where people can bring their energy and passion to what we need to do as a community. And there are mechanisms and processes that allow you to not be at odds with your neighbor, right? So I just talked about one around why we have an alternate, and if there's a conflict that you're concerned about, but at the same time, I think there's so much energy in this community for the betterment of Bristol that we need to try to continue to help people understand that there are ways for them to participate and do it in a very positive way for all of us.
Well, John, thank you very much for your insight, and thank you also for the great volunteer work you do as chair of the planning board for the town. And for those watching, take a peek at the town website. You'll find the planning board link right there, and you can take a look, see if there's information that might make you want to come forward, get involved, and help to make Bristol better. Thank you for watching.